Okay, everyone, I think today's lesson will be of great interest to you. Yeah, we're going to look at interest the next bunch of days, probably 3 days. We're going to start with simple interest, and then next day we'll look at another type of interest, which is called compound interest. All right, so what's interest? Well, I think we've already talked about it, haven't we? If we haven't, or even if we have, here's a definition for interest. It's the amount of money earned on an investment or paid on a loan. So it can be good, like when you put money in the bank, right? At the end of the year, they give you a little money back if it's a savings account. That's called the interest. It can also be bad. If you take out a loan, you want to buy a car, but you don't have enough money, so you take out a loan, you are charged interest by the lending institution, the bank or whatever it is, credit union, and you have to pay it back. All the money you borrowed plus the interest. I think we did talk about this before. What's bigger, the amount of interest that the bank gives you or the amount of interest that the bank charges you? The amount of interest the bank charges you. That's how they make money. That's how they make enormous profits. All right, as I said, we're going to look at two types of interest. The first one we'll do today, and it's simple interest. So what's simple interest? It's interest that's paid once and generally at the end of the time period of the investment. Don't worry so much about the definition. I think what will really help you is the formula. Simple interest has another name. It's also called regular interest. That surprises me a little bit because compound interest is definitely more common. Simple interest is definitely more easy to understand. It's more basic, and maybe that's why it's called regular interest. But compound interest is more common in today's financial world. Okay, so here's the formula. I equals PRT. It's so important that we put a box around it. That's when you know things are really important. So what do these letters all stand for here? Well, the I stands for surprise interest. This is the simple interest formula, and stands for interest. So on the other side, you have three letters. You're multiplying them together. So it's P times R times T. P is the principal, and maybe we could define that right now. The principal is the original amount of money invested or borrowed. It's also called the present value. So in other words, when you put a bunch of money in the bank and you're hoping to get some interest on that money, that's called the principal. The amount of money you put in the bank was the principal. Or if you borrowed money, that would also be called the principal. Today we're definitely focusing on you investing money, not on you borrowing money from the bank. Okay, the R stands for interest rate. And in this formula, the interest rate must be a decimal. Now, that's kind of tricky because when you're given the interest rate, it's always going to be given to you as a percent, and you've got to change it to a decimal in order to use this formula here. So basically what the interest rate is, it's the agreement for how much interest will be paid as a percent, right? Now, I've actually written fixed interest rate here. The reason it's a fixed interest rate that we'll look at today is because it's guaranteed not to change during the term of the investment. That's not always the case, right? You could get, especially when you take out mortgages and stuff, you can get variable interest rates. So the interest rate could actually change while you're paying back your mortgage. But with a fixed one, when you lock into that percent, it's always going to stay there. Okay, and the interest rate, as I said, it's always expressed as a percent. It's always going to be given to you as a percent. So for example, they might tell you that the interest rate is something like 1.45%. But then when you want to use the formula up here, you wouldn't put 1.45, you change it to a decimal. Do you know how to change it to a decimal? You divide it by 100. Or if you want, you move the decimal spot over 2 spaces to the left. So I'll write down here divided by 100, and if you divide by 100 you get 0.0145, and that's the value that you would put into the formula up here. Again, you could also move the decimal spot over 2 spots. Oh, there'd be an opening here for a 0. Anyway, we'll talk about this more later too. Let's keep going. T is time. And this must be in years. It has to be expressed in years. If the time you leave the money in is like a number of months, you guys switch it to years. If it's a number of days, you guys switch it to years. Everything must be in years. And we'll look at that in a minute. So another word for time is term. A term is the length of time over which the money is invested or borrowed. It's always expressed in years, as I said. Okay, maturity. Maturity is when you have an agreed to end date of an investment. Now, this isn't always the case. When you put money into your savings account, there's no agreement as to when you're going to take the interest out, for example. But when you buy something like a bond or a GIC, which we'll talk about later, there's an agreement. Okay, you're not going to touch that money for 5 years, and at that point, you'll have reached maturity. The bond or the GIC will have reached maturity, and you'll be able to get your interest. If you try to get the interest out before that time, before it matures, you'll likely be charged a penalty. They'll charge you some money for breaking the agreement. Okay, per annum. It's just a fancy, what is that, Latin way of saying per year. Okay, so you'll actually see something like this, 4% slash A. That means 4% per year. Of course, you could also see 4% per year, which is nice, but slash A means per annum. Kind of like annually, right? You've heard of annually, which means every year. Per annum means every year. And finally, future value. Future value is the value, and we represent future value with an A, the value of an investment at the end of the term. Because let's think about this. Let's say you put $100 in the bank. So what would that be called if you put $100 in the bank? That's your principal. If your principal is $100, and let's say you earn some interest, how about your interest is $6? Now, at the end of the year, you've made your $6 interest. Does that mean in the bank you now only have $6? No, you still have your principal and you also have your interest. So your A, your future value, would be $106. So what's the formula then for future value? What did I do to get the 106? I added together the principal and the interest. I added together P and I. So there's your formula. Oh, sorry. It's also called the final amount. Future values also has the name final amount. And here's the formula. So you have to be careful when you're doing these questions. Sometimes they'll just ask you for the interest. Sometimes they'll ask you for the future value. So if they're asking you for future value, you have to do 2 steps. Although you could do it in 1 step just by thinking, what's the formula for I, for interest? Well, we put that up here. I equals PRT. So I could replace this I with PRT, which would give me A equals P, that same P here, and then I, and I is the same as PRT, right? I equals PRT, so I can replace that I with PRT. Now, for advanced math here, you've got P here and P here. You could factor out a P. I don't know if you guys have covered this before, but you could factor out a P, and you'd be left with A equals P multiplied by 1 plus RT. So these bottom 2 down here aren't as important. If they make sense, great. If they don't worry about it. But this one is important, how you're going to get the final amount or the future value. Okay, let's do some questions. All right, Marty invested $2,500 at 2.5% simple interest. It's paid annually with a term of 10 years. Find the interest accumulated and the future value of his investment at maturity. So there's 2 things to find here, interest and future value. I'm going to write this for probably every single one of the questions. I equals P, I'll put times R times T. Do we know the interest? No, that's what we're trying to figure out. Do we know the principal? Yeah, that's the amount of money that you put into the bank. Well, he invested $2,500, so that's our principal, $2,500. Times, do we know the rate? Yeah, it's 2.5. Should I put 2.5 here? No, if you do that, you just got it wrong. How come? Because remember, our 2.5% must be switched into a decimal. So I'm going to go 2.5. How do I switch it to a decimal? I know it has a decimal in it right now, but it's a percent. You want to get it out of percent form into decimal form. So you can either divide it by 100, or you could move that decimal 2 spots to the left, and whichever way you do it, you're going to get 0.025. That's the number that goes in here. Times. T is time, and time is 10 years, and it's in years, which is perfect. It needs to be in years. So I multiply that, and when I multiply those numbers together, I will get the interest. Equals $625. Okay, so that's how much interest was earned over the 10 years. Now, that was the first question. The second question was, what's the future value? So remember, future value is A. I know that's weird. It's like future amount, I guess, or final amount. That's where the A comes from. So A equals P plus I. Well, P is the principal. That's how much you put in the bank to start. That was the $2,500. and I is how much you earned, that's the 625. We add those together, you'll have the new and final amount that Marty now has in the bank. And you get 3,125. Okay, good. These questions will get hard as we go along. Sashka is a golf pro in Banff. She invested $1,400 for 36 weeks. She'll use the money for new golf clubs. Okay, good. The interest rate is 1.75% per annum. How much interest does Sashka earn? So again, we're going to use the formula, I equals PRT. Do we know interest? No, that's what we're trying to find. We have to find the interest. So we'll write down I, we're trying to find that. Principal, that's the amount that Sashka put in the bank. That's $1,400. Okay, now a couple difficult things here. R, that's the interest rate. Here's the interest rate. Do I write down 1.75? No. How come? I have to change it to a decimal. I got to get it out of percent form. How do I do it? I move the decimal over 2 spots, or if that doesn't make sense to you, you don't like doing that, you can divide it by 100. And if you do that, you will get 0.0175. I guess I could write that. 0.0175. So that's our percent. Now, even trickier, we have to multiply that by the time. And the time is right here, 36 weeks. So do I go time 36? No. How come? Because that's in weeks. We want it to be in years. If you put 36 here, it means that she invested it for 36 years. She's going to make a lot of money. This is just 36 weeks. It's not very long. She's not going to make very much money. That's less than a year. In fact, how many weeks are there in a year? There's 52 weeks in a year. So, any idea? How do you figure out how much of a year 36 is? You think of it as a fraction. It's 36 weeks out of how many weeks in a year? 52. That's how you do it. So there's 52 weeks in a year. What if it didn't say weeks? What if it said days? Well, then it would be 36 out of how many days in a year? 365. So you'd go 36 divided by 365. There's 365 days in a year. We don't worry about leap years. Okay, the other possibility is if it said months, 36 months. So then we'd go 36 divided by how many months in a year? 12. And by the way, 36 divided by 12 equals 3. It would be 3 years, and that's perfect. So there's 12 months in a year. So make sure, if you don't know those things, make sure you write those down. It's important. All right, so we have to go 1,400 times 0.0175 times 36 and divide by 52. It doesn't matter when you do that division step. You can do it right at the start if you want. I'm just going to do it at the end. I'm going to multiply all the numbers on top, 1,400, 0.0175, multiplied by 36, then divide by 52, and I get the answer 16.961. So if we do the rounding here, it actually won't round up. So you'll just get $16.96. Okay, now we have 3 questions that are tricky because you're not going to be finding the interest. You have to find either the P, the R, or the T. So people often find this difficult. Stefan is saving to buy a used car. He needs $9,800 and he already has $9,475 saved. He plans to invest his savings at an annual rate of 1.59%. How long will it take for Stefan to have enough money? All right, so the first thing we need to do is figure out how much more does he need. He needs $9,800. But he already has $9,475. So if we want to know how much more money he needs to go from $9,475 up to $9,800, what do? We subtract. Grab your calculators if you need. You're going to get $325. So that's how much money he needs to earn. How does he want to earn it? Through interest. So that's actually the interest in this case. His interest is $325. That's what he wants to earn in interest. Do we know his principal? Yeah, we do. That's how much money he already has saved and he's going to put in the bank. He's already saved $9,475, right? That's the principal he's putting in, and he wants to earn this amount of interest, $325, to get him up to a final amount of $9,800. Okay, what else? Do we know R, the interest rate? Yeah, we do. It's 1.59%. Or if we raise the decimal, divide it by 100, or move the decimal over 2 spots, you'll get 0.0159. And T, do we know the time? No, we don't. It says how long will it take for Stefan to have enough money, and it doesn't tell us what the T is. Okay, so what we need to do, we're going to go back to the first page here. We need to rearrange this formula right here, the I equals PRT. We need to rearrange it 3 more ways so that we isolate the P, we isolate the R, and we isolate the T. But let's say we wanted to get the P by itself. If you wanted to get the P by itself, you'd have to get rid of the R and the T. And what are the R and the T doing here? They're multiplying by the P. So what you're going to have to do is do the opposite of multiplying. You have to divide by RT. So you do the same to both sides. So you'd actually end up with P equals I and then divided by the R and the T. You'd still be multiplying those together, the R and T, but you'd be dividing the I by that amount. So that is how you're going to figure out the principal if you're given everything else. What if you're trying to figure out the R? Well, in that case, you'd need to divide both sides by the P and the T. So you'd end up with R equals I divided by P times T. That's the formula you use if you're trying to find R. And what if you're trying to find T? Well, in that case, you're going to have to divide both sides by PR. So you'd have I divided by PR, P times R if you want. So you actually have 4 formulas. They're all based on this one, but you end up with having these rearrangements of it if you're trying to find P or R or T. So in this case, the question we're doing right now, we are trying to find T. We don't know what T is. So we need this bottom formula right here. T equals I divided by PR. So I'll write that here. T equals I divided by P times R. So let's fill in what we know. We don't know T. We know I. It's $325. Divided by P is $9,475. Times R, we're going to use the 0.0159. Okay, now you can use your calculator, but be careful. If you have a basic calculator and you go 325 divided by this times this, it's not going to give you the right answer. You need to put this amount in brackets if you put it into your calculator in one go. The other thing you could do is just get that answer on the bottom. Go 9,475 times 0.0159, get that answer and write it down, and then go 325 divided by that. But I know most people don't want to do that. They want to do it all in one go in their calculator. So please put brackets in this bottom part or you're probably going to get it done. So I'm going to go 325 divided by bracket 9475 times 0.0159, close the bracket, and then hit equals. And I get 2.157. I'll round that to 2.16. 2.16 what? Well, it's T, which is time, and remember, time's always in years. Okay. Robin has $15,000, wow, to invest in a financial institution. Calculate the annual rate of interest if she plans to earn $3,500 at the end of 2 years. So this can get confusing what they're asking, so you might want to write down all the things they talk about here. Do we know the interest? She plans to earn $3,500. Yeah, we do know interest. It's $3,500. Do we know the principal? That's how much she put in the bank. Yeah, $15,000. So we've got that too. Do we know the interest rate? No, we're trying to find the rate of interest. We don't know it. You can put a question mark there if you want. And time. Do we know how long she's keeping in there? Yep, 2 years. So there's everything we know, and we want to figure out what R is. So what formula are we going to use? This one. R equals I divided by PT. R equals I divided by P times T. And we just plug into that. R equals 3,500 divided by 15,000 times 2 for T. I'm going to put that in brackets to make sure I do that first. I mean, I could even do this in my head. 15,000 times 2 is 30,000. So basically, I'm going to go 3,500 divided by 30,000. And I get 0.11666666. So basically, that's 117 if I round. Okay, now let's think about this. Does that mean 0.117%? No, it doesn't. Because remember, in this formula, look what we did always to our percent. It was 2.5 and we changed it to 0.025 to use the formula. It was 1.75% and we changed it to 0.0175 to use the formula. It was 1.59 and we changed it to 0.0159 to use the formula. So this is not the percent. This is the decimal. We got to go back to the percent now. How do we do that? This time we're going to move the decimal not 2 to the left but 2 to the right. Or if you want, this time we're not going to divide by 100 like we did here, divide by 100, divide by 100. We're going to multiply by 100. So in order to get it into percent form, you got to multiply it by 100 or move it 2 to the right. I get 11.7%. That's a very good percent. If you can get that kind of interest rate, invest there. All right, one more. Let's go straight to writing down I equals P, or R equals T equals. So let's see what we got. Miranda invest 1,500. So she invested it. What's that? That's the principal. In an account earning simple interest at a rate of 7.25%. So there's our R, 7.25%. But wait a minute, I'm not going to write down 7.25, am I? No, because I need to switch that out of percent form by moving the decimal over 2 spots or by dividing by 100. And if you do that, you'll get 0.0725. Another pretty good investment here. Calculate the number of days she must keep the money in her accounts. We don't know the number of days, but she wants to earn 250 in interest. So 250 is there. So we don't know T. Oh, I think we've already done one. I messed up. I didn't do one where we don't know principal. Oh, well, that's okay. So we're going to use this formula again. T equals I divided by P times R. I divided by P times R. Plug in everything you know. I is 250. P is 1,500. R is 0.0725. I'm going to make sure I put this in brackets in my calculator so I don't mess up. And I get 2.2988. So I'm going to run that to 2.299. Okay, so 2.299 what? Years. Remember in this formula it's always years. But wait a minute. Look back up here. It says how many days was the money invested. So we got to switch from years to days. Okay, good thing we already wrote this down. How many days in a year? 365. So if there's 365 days in 1 year, then how many days are there in 2.299 years? What are you going to do with that number? You've got to multiply it by the 365. And once you do that, you'll get your final answer, which rounds to 839 days. That's the answer we're looking for in this question. Okay, so that's simple interest. I hope you find it relatively simple. And next day we'll go on to compound interest. So good luck, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye-bye.